Hello everyone, and welcome back to Historically Inaccurate. Oftentimes history can feel pointless, but my job is to make it a little less that way. Today we are continuing our mini-series PsycHistory, and we are going to be looking into some basic principles of psychology and tying them back to our history. Whether you're here for the history or the psychology, you are bound to learn something new.
Unless you've already watched the video.
Today, for the special second episode of PsycHistory, we are going to be exploring the science of habits and how they apply to our history. Habits are so ingrained in our personality that they become almost instinctual, like brushing our teeth. Habits form by what is called a habit loop, which is a three-step process. It starts with a trigger that lets the behavior form. This trigger can be as simple as your parents asking you to brush your teeth. Next, a routine behavior is activated. Your parents consistently continue to urge you to brush your teeth. Eventually, you start to do it without being asked and without much thought. Lastly, your brain assumes that every time you complete the habitual action, you will receive some sort of reward. For example, if your parents thank you every time you brush your teeth, which will give you a positive feeling, your brain will again associate brushing teeth with parental gratitude. Eventually, your brain will be so used to receiving the gratitude after brushing teeth, you will receive the positive feeling without actual gratitude from your parents. So how does this tie into history? Habitual science is very well represented in post-Civil War reconstruction. In this period, the rights of African Americans greatly increased, but this racial divide that existed in the minds of Americans all along persisted. Although the 15th Amendment gave former slaves the ability to vote, many white Americans suggested you could only vote based on the grandfather clause. The grandfather clause stated that you could only vote if your grandfather could. In some cases, white men discouraged and disallowed African Americans from taking the bell.
This is so sad. Can we copyright strike?
Alexa, add strawberries to the shopping list.
Alexa, play Despacito 2.
Despacito.
Okay, enough. No, we're not doing a sing-along.
Beep, burrito.
No sing-along.
Eat some bean burritos.
I want to eat a bag of Cheetos.
Please.
Okay, good.
Although the 15th Amendment gave former slaves the ability to vote, many white Americans suggested that you could only vote based on the grandfather clause. The grandfather clause stated that you could only vote if your grandfather could. In some cases, white men discouraged and disallowed African American voters by having a literacy test or by enforcing a poll tax. Many African Americans could not pay the tax or complete the literary test. Despite the new laws being enforced in the United States, the habitual racism views persisted readily in the United States. So why do these habits form? Really, the reason habits exist is because our brain is naturally inclined to laziness.
Oh, that's why I have so many bad habits.
Habits form due to common activities, so when a habit is used, it frees up our mental activities to work on other problems. This provides a huge advantage and disadvantage. It allows our brain to be more efficient, however it can sometimes lead to problems when habits become detrimental to our well-being. These habits can be extremely hard to shake and can eventually morph into addictions. Before the Civil War, most Americans were taught from a young age to look down upon the African American community as lesser humans due to their past status as slave laborers. This habitual state of thinking becomes hard to shake off, which eventually leads to a racist state of mind that persisted past the Civil War, despite the laws against it. Of course, laws don't really change your mind because of the way our brains are hardwired to form habits. In fact, if you think about it, part of the reason that the North was against slavery was due to the lack of habitual racism that they exercised. It was easier for them to shake off that way of life because it was not ingrained in their mind. Now, how do we go about shaking habits? To begin, we have to understand each of the three parts of your habits. What is triggering the habit? Ask yourself, how can you stop this trigger from occurring, and therefore cut the habit up from the roots? Attempt to avoid situations that may trigger your habit, and try not to associate your habit with that trigger. Next, find out how you are letting this habit repeat. If you can stop this repetition from occurring, your habit will be less useful for your brain. Make sure you either decrease the frequency you allow your habit to occur or cut it out entirely. Lastly, find out what reward your brain thinks it will receive when it continues its habit. First, identify what rewards you have been trained to believe you will receive for the habit, and then train yourself to stop associating that reward with the habit. After early post-Civil War Reconstruction formed a South very similar to pre-Civil War South, the Republicans were outraged and put forth the 14th Constitutional Amendment to give African Americans and all other people equal rights. The first and arguably most important section of the 14th Amendment reads, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof." All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge their privileges of immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. Although some may think that the 14th Amendment did the African Americans justice at the time, it was not effective due to the habitual racism practiced by white Americans at the time. The 14th Amendment might have even intensified racism in the South. In fact, laws were put in place to increase segregation and racism during Reconstruction. These laws were known as Jim Crow laws and were considered brutal and unfair. Jim Crow laws further segregated blacks and whites until Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement in the 1950s. The statement, "we always turn out like our parents," holds true to this point in American life. Habits created by our peers and family members influence our own, and without even meaning to, we've created a racially separate society. Through the understanding of science of habits, the post-Civil War Reconstruction was unsuccessful in creating a fair and equal nation. And that is all I have today on the science of habits. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you will use this new knowledge of the past sometime in the future. I'm Professor Will, and this has been PsycHistory.
Yeah. Like and subscribe.
Do the like thing.
36 minutes of footage. That's a lot.
That's
a
not
big oof
horrible
to
for a
try
10-minute video.
Wait, does the silver button just stops it, right?
Yeah.